Thank you very much, Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your invitation. I think it's a pleasure to get in touch with you and to meet so many high-ranking excellencies, presidents of important countries in this region, and I am very honored to be here. And thanks, of course, to the Academy of Cultural Diplomacy that you organized this first conference here. And when I heard about the results yesterday, I think it was a good idea to come to Skopje to discuss those issues. And I think we should follow in the next years in a similar way to bring people together. Many important issues were discussed at the Skopje Cultural Diplomacy Forum yesterday. The meetings dealt with multilateralism, the impact of culture for a better understanding between countries, the future of Europe, and role that the Western Balkans should play. And first of all, I can tell you the position of Germany, and this is the position of the current government and the former government. We have now a government with Social Democrats, Greens, and Liberals. We had before the government of Angela Merkel with Social Democrats and Christian Democrats, but all parties say our goal is to include the Western Balkan countries into the European family. There's no debate between the parties. Everybody support the process, and we want that these countries will be members of the European Union, and with it too, of course, North Macedonia. But if you think about the last 20 years, there is a lot of problems which are not normal in accession processes. We had, first of all, 6 member states in the European Union, then 9, then 12, then 15. And after 89, 90, after the reunification of Europe, we had new member states from Middle and Eastern Europe in a perspective of 10, 12 years. So it was decided in 1990, 1991 to open the European Union for Poland, for Hungary, for Czech Republic, for Slovakia, and around 2004 they became members. This was nearly 10, 12 years. Now we are discussing about the Balkans since 20 years, more than 20 years. And if you see the different countries, the process of integration is very different. While Serbia has opened the accession talks since a couple of years, for example, Albania has started the negotiations last year. North Macedonia has been a candidate for European Union's membership since 2005. 2 years we have the 20th anniversary of being candidate. And in 2009, the European Commission agreed to start the negotiations process, but due to identify related demands so far, it hasn't happened. In 2006, Bosnia and Herzegovina applied to be a member of the European Union. It has become a candidate since last year. Montenegro has been a candidate for the European Union since 2010, and until now, only 3 of 33 negotiation capitals were closed. In summary, the process of European enlargement towards the Western Balkan states has stagnated. And when we hear today debates about Ukraine becoming a member state, I think this is not a fair process. This is, of course, a signal to Ukraine in this moment of the war to say the door is open to the European Union, but everybody who expects that Ukraine could shortly be member of the European Union doesn't understand the European processes. And before Ukraine is member of the European Union, I think Western Balkan states has to be member of the European Union. We need these priorities, otherwise the European project will not function. And there is a lot of reasons why it happens like it happens. There's a deep change in our life fostered by the globalization, new technologies, digitalization, artificial intelligence are promoting new chances, but it includes new risks and threats. And we have inside the European Union right-wing extremistic groups. They have arisen and got many sympathizers, particularly they are involved into governments, and they are Eurosceptical, and they are usually against enlargement. This is an interesting process. They are part of the Union, part of governments. They want to be member of the European Union, but they are against new members. And therefore, we have to convince a lot of people for this enlargement process. And Europe had, of course, in the last years, a lot of other issues, the corona pandemic, the global powers who are increasing, like China and Southeast Asia. There are reasons why we are talking about a pulley crisis for Europe. It includes also Russia's renewed imperial ambitions. It brought the war back again to Europe. But this is not an argument not to go ahead with the accession process of Western Balkan. And after the Russian war against Ukraine, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said the German word Zeitenwende. This means, in other words, a turning point in international politics. I think this is a very German perspective to say Zeitenwende and turning point in international politics, because this region had a lot of turning points in the last 30 years. There was, first of all, the turning point of the end of the Yugoslavian state, the collapse of the Yugoslavian state. Then you had a war in this region. And when people say the war is back in Europe, in Ukraine, no, the war was back in the 19th on the Balkans. This was a war inside Europe, and therefore we have to think this word Zeitenwende, this turning point, not only from the German perspective, but as well from the Balkan perspective. And you know, Francis Fukuyama, this American writer, wrote after 1990, this is the end of history. Now the Soviet Union had collapsed and all the problems for the future are solved. This was not true. We see we have more problems than before, and we have to find new solutions. And my message today is we have to solve political problems, but we have to think how we can overcome the historical and the identity discussions we have in this country and in the neighbor countries. If you define the solutions of problems from history, and every state has its own position and his own view on history, you will never have a solution for the whole region. And therefore, in 2014, then Chancellor Angela Merkel has established this Berlin process. The goal was to foster regular meetings for the Western Balkan states to find out solutions together. And in 2020, the Western Balkans signed an agreement to establish a common regional market. So this is the European idea starting in this region, because all the other things doesn't function, and it includes the free circulation of goods, services, capital, and individuals. I want to emphasize the Regional Youth Office established in 2016. It promotes cooperation between civil stakeholders among the young generation. And however, there are weaknesses of the Berlin process. On the one hand, many projects are implemented sufficiently, and on the other hand, the regional cooperation of the Western Balkans is not in line with the European integration process. Europe answered not so fast as it was possible to support this process, and we have to bring this together. And I think North Macedonia has established an alternative in 2019, the Open Balkan. It's comparable with the Schengen area, and I know the behavior of some members of the European Union is not constructive in that process, but I say we have to go on this way to to create cooperation across borders. I'm aware, too, the impact of history on the Balkans is enormous. The countries are facing the past of the Ottoman Empire and the former Yugoslavia. There are unsolved border conflicts, including ethnical and religious tensions, and there is the pain of wars and losses in the past. And for now, we shouldn't talk about the past. I talked about an amount of conflicts we have to deal with in the European Union, and the Western Balkans have the same issues too. And if we see the figures in the world, Germany had around 70 million inhabitants in the 1950s. Today it has 80 million inhabitants. Europe's population has 450 million over decades, and the world's population in that time increased from 2 billion to 8 billion. So the influence of Europe is getting weaker year by year if we don't cooperate together. 2 billion, 450 million Europeans, 8 billion today, and in the future even more. So we need European answers to find good solutions. And I want to tell you some experience. I come from Aachen, in the west of Germany, closer to Paris than to Berlin, even in the feeling of the people, and it was the city of Charlemagne. And Charlemagne is such an example. It was the emperor, and he had an empire including Germany, France, Benelux, and Italy. So the old European Union. And the French people say, this is our emperor, Charlemagne. The Germans say, no, it's a German, it's Karl der Große. But it's the same person. And sometimes you have the different things here. I learned about some leader here in Macedonia, where the Bulgarians say he is a Bulgarian, and the Macedonians said Samuel or something like this. Is this the name? Don't touch that issue. No, we touch every issue because okay. But I come now to this point. You have different positions of history in the people, not in the heads of states. They know we need pragmatic solutions, but populists and others use history to bring conflicts into the thing. And the German-French history was for centuries a history of war and of hate. And people learned in the school, and therefore I touch it in the German-French solution, was perceived as naturally given, hereditary enemies. So the pupils learned in the school, the Frenchman is the enemy by birth, by genes. You can't change it by politics. It's in the genes that we have to fight each other every 30, 50, 40 years. And the first, and now remember, the first German unity started in 1871. Before Germany was not a nation state, there were different states in Germany, the Holy Empire, Holy Roman Empire of German nation with different emperors, but you had a federal system, but not a centralized state. 1871, the German state was founded, after the German-French War. And it was founded not in Germany, but in Versailles, in the castle of Louis XIV, the Proud of France. This was the place to found the German state. So from the very first day, the biggest humiliation you can imagine to found a state on a foreign territory was there. And the French people lost the war. They lost Alsace-Lorraine, Elsass-Lothringen, but they said, don't talk about it, always think about it. This was the measure. So don't touch the issue. They said, don't touch the issue, now we lost, but we have the possibility. Once we will be strong and we'll take it back. This was the feeling for 40 years. And then the First World War started, 1914. French thought nobody wanted this war, you remember, the attack in Sarajevo, and nobody wanted this war. And at the end, Russian Austria, Germany, France were in a world war. Not wanted the war, but everybody said, okay, if the war is there, we use the opportunity to change history. And then Germany lost this war and had to surrender in a railway wagon in the forest of Compiègne. And then the treaty was made in Versailles. They went back to Versailles, made the Treaty of Versailles, and this treaty were, in the feeling of the German people, so injustice that the young democracy of Germany, 1918, was always defending this treaty, and 12 years later, Hitler came to power, and you had the same problem, the same process, the same revenge we saw before. And then Hitler went into France, 1940, took this old railway wagon from a museum in south of France, brought it to the forest of Compiègne, and then the French had again to surrender 1940. In the same wagon, history came back. And in between, millions of dead people between the two countries, and the whole world, and whole Europe, and Soviet Union. 60 million people after the Second World War. And now, 5 years after the war, 5 years, not longer, the politicians decided we will stop this circle of war. And Robert Schuman proposed the agreement of coal and steel to say those industries who always led to war, coal and steel, for production of weapons, we take them out of the national control and bring them to a European level, the Montan Union, where French and Germans decide together about coal and steel at that time. This was a historical sensation because all the French people had in mind the millions of deaths, the murdered Jews, all the things who happened just 5 years ago. But they made this big step to say, now we start a new chapter. We don't forget about it, but we start a new chapter in remembrance that this shouldn't be happen again. And this was open to other member states. Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Italy followed. So this was the core of the European Union, this Montan Union with coal and steel. And then they cooperated on the economy, the Treaty of Rome, the cooperation in other issues, and for Helmut Kohl it was always the final stone in the project, the common currency. If you have a common currency, you can't go into war against each other, because to go into war you need money, and this was in the nation state's competence, and the idea of the European common currency was not an economical question. It's today an economical question to be strong against the dollar and other currencies in the world. And the BRIC states now think about a new currency against the dollar. But this is one aspect of the common currency. But the main aspect was to have a common currency so that war in Europe between member states of this currency is not possible any longer. So this is the story. And I think we can learn from this process that if you discuss about historical issues, don't touch it, Mr. Stoyanov told me, yes, but they are there. But you have to bring to the people the broader view. We all are winners if we overcome this historical question. And we discussed with the former president just 1 hour ago about the question, if we have globalization, do we need nation states? And my position was learning all of this. For the big challenges in the world, the nation state alone is too small. Every nation state is too small. To fight climate change, you can't fight it in 150 states because you need common solutions. In COVID, we learned we have to fight it across borders. It's not possible for one state to solve alone the COVID problem. But we need cooperation across borders. This means for Western Balkan, you must be part of the European Union to be strong in a globalized world, but you need something like national identity because the people feel where they live. They have a regional feeling. They have a tradition and history in their field. But this feeling must be not stronger than the capacity of solution. So you can be a proud North Macedonian, a proud Serb, a proud Croat, but you cooperate in the big issues you have to solve, knowing the history, but using pragmatic solutions for the problems we have today. And if this is the European perspective, I think we can find even a solution for the accession process. We need steps in between, how the states can be closer to the European Union. Probably you can open the single market for under different rules so that you can cooperate before you are full member. And at the end, you need the perspective of a full membership of European Union. Otherwise, it will be fall back into the times of war, because people who are against this process always use the problems, use always the history, use always different positions to destroy the broader perspective of Europe. And our problem today is we have this process inside the European Union in different governments. At the moment in the polls in Germany, the AfD has 20%. They will go to the European elections with the perspective Germany should go out of the European Union. They destroy the whole project. And you have to fight them, you have to argue why this European project was a project of wealth, of peace, of the rule of law, and therefore we have to fight inside the Union and we have to fight outside the Union, and therefore I am in favor of the membership of the Western Balkan, of solutions on a pragmatical basis, and to overcome in a common way those historical different positions and hate we saw in the past. And this is the European perspective, and I'm happy to be here and to discuss this with you. Thank you very much.